Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. We are talking today with the fabulous Jan Melnik about executive branding trends and what's going on in this space. So, Jan, for people who may not know you, give them a little bit of your background and what type of work you do with executives today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marie, for having me. This is always so much fun. And honestly, talking about one of my very favorite client groups, the C suite executive and the aspiring rising professionals. I have worked in this space for more than 20 years, specializing definitely at the C suite level across every industry and discipline. I always joke about how I have ADHD and would never want to work only with finance or only with healthcare or only law enforcement. I like the full plethora of different functionalities, company types, private sector, public sector, foundation, you name it, across the corporate scope. And the fun part about this audience for anyone who's dipping their toe in for the first time or wanting to expand is that this audience values expertise. They love subject matter experts who can help them navigate. They are used to delegating. They are used to investing in services and having a hands-off approach. They're not going to be micromanagers 95% of the time. And so you can do the great work you do, provide the advice you do, knowing it will be accepted because you're in a true partnership and collaboration. And so that's one of the things that has fueled my private practice for many years and led to an abundant amount of referrals, because once they bring you in, they assign you to other projects. You can do white papers, you can go from there, be members of their boards. Lots of different opportunities can come from that.
I love that. So, Jan, you've been, like you said, you've been doing this work and you work with people in very different settings. We're going to talk about that a little bit and the different expectations and different trends that are happening in some of those pockets. And also, we've got some people saying hello. So, John O'Connor, hello, good to see you. Laura Slauson, great. Thank you for joining us. I know Laura works with executives as well. And Valerie does some coaching with executives. So we're glad that you're here, Valerie. We're going to be talking about personal branding. And Nancy. So thank you all for joining us. If you're joining us, say hello in the chat. If you are watching the replay, go ahead and drop hello in the chat as you're watching the replay as well. And we come every Tuesday to talk about the now, the new, and the next in careers. And we are going to do that today as it focuses on executive branding. And so, Jan, we were just kind of reading a little bit and exploring some of the trends. And one of the things that is always been true, but continues to be true and important, is this idea of the executive being able to differentiate themselves from all of their peers. What do you think executives are doing now there? What is the challenge they're facing in doing that today?
It's a great question, because when we think about what defines a successful search, truly for clients at every level, not only executive, it is being able to tell those authentic stories, differentiate, have pristine documents that absolutely resonate with excellence at the executive level. So no bells and whistles that would be inappropriate for a C-suite executive, but rather very strongly articulated results, accomplishments, quantifiable, vision oriented, focused forward on what is going to be next in their leadership success story. And so that's a slight twist on it. I would say that the tools that my executives are successfully using have expanded well beyond what we used to provide, which was generally only a resume, a LinkedIn, a bio, and a cover letter. I am seeing all of those still in play, still very important. A bio with a photo that's very visually attractive, even using Canva instead of Word to create it, but at the C level. Those still remain very important, but it's the extra pieces that executives are using that is becoming the differentiator. So always having a game plan going into each level of interviewing, individual and panel interviews, having the documentation that they present as a leave behind once they do meet in person, and they eventually do. This type of hiring does not happen remotely the whole way through. beginning interviews, yes, but eventually they're flown out. They needed an airport location, that sort of thing. But having a leave behind for every interview in person, a follow up tool, and then being able to segue. And these are some of the sneak peeks at things we'll talk about in April at the symposium in Baltimore, but having a PowerPoint, having a deck that is very concise, very targeted, usually around the third or fourth interview, is making all the difference for this level of client. And our ability to provide that, suggest it, recommend it, sell it, close it, and deliver, that's a big difference.
Oh, I love that because it gives them an opportunity to differentiate. It also gives us as service providers opportunities to differentiate. Now, one of the things, and kind of going back to the front part of branding, being able to align those stories, we were talking about how the political, social climate is so volatile for these individuals right now, right? And you don't know, well, you've got to figure out, what does a company stand for? Where do they align? Is it going to be a good fit for you? Might be related to DEI, diversity types of issues, environmental types of issues, bigger political types of issues with the new leadership change up. So how are you helping your executives make sure that they're doing the research, but then also align their stories to the organizations that they're targeting?
Great question. I think it goes to the core of how we begin our work, which is the process by which we glean who they really are. Whether it's through questionnaire, which you all know I don't do, but that in-person, remote, a collection of a deep dive into who they are, really getting folks to articulate their stories, pushing back when there's hesitation, when there's a wavering in the book, knowing I need to dig deeper, I need to get at the core of this, because that's going to come through in their executive interviews. So really coaching them through that process so that we then, as the writers and strategists, pull out the very best of the stories that authentically reflect their ability to deliver on what they're promising. Then the alignment with the opportunity, really pushing to understand what about this opportunity, if they're being referred and their network is going to be huge, they're not applying with an easy apply button on LinkedIn. This is all definitely connections that they've been introduced to. So they're following up, they're getting opportunities through board relationships. They need to really impress me, first of all, that it is a right fit from everything they know. They need to do their due diligence. They have to do their homework or pay us to do it, so that we then walk through everything that is being sought. One example I like to use, many of you know I also work in higher education, and those sorts of job search for presidential roles, chancellors and provosts, typically require a 5 to 6 page, yes, 6-page cover letter to articulate everything a board is seeking. And it is important to obviously create a document with effective use of white space, subheadings to lead the reader through every category being sought, and being able to speak to each of the issues, including the political hot buttons. Know the environment, know the state in which you are applying, what is legal these days relative to some of those governance, social, and DEI issues, and being able to, again, reflect genuine capability, interest, and that overall alignment. That's got to come through every single document. And our ability to coach at that level in the strategy writing and then interviewing can make all the difference.
Yes, yes. And it's at every level. It gets more, but I remember, I used to recruit and hire faculty. I was a staff person on that, but even then it was the cover letters. The high level staff had cover letters that were multi-page. You address everything that's in the job description. But as you're saying, yes, we're going to align keywords, but it's so much deeper than that, because we're doing the research and really understanding the culture and what language they're using, especially around some of these hot button issues. And it's so much deeper at that level that we're going with the candidates.
Exactly. And yet we must be succinct and concise And a lot of times folks in this space may go on and on and on, like I sometimes do. And we've got to boil it down. We've got to make sure the car story is there, that it's absolutely crafted as tightly as possible and navigates smoothly, no matter what the organization is. Detail will be important to some of the people making the decision. So getting a quick read, and these folks are pretty savvy about understanding different types. So meet them where they are and know that after every single interview navigating the employment cycle, you've got an opportunity working with someone like us to craft the follow-on tools, whether it's a traditional thank you letter that goes well beyond to meet the needs that that person articulated in the interview, and navigate away from that for someone else. You know, Marie, because we've trained on this, the 30, 60, 90 and the Q1 to Q4 plan figures largely in the success of an executive candidate. And so being able to really spell out a game plan for what that person will do almost places them on the executive team already and can very likely lead to an offer. So
yes, yes. And we do have some people saying we're not using DEI. Yes, when on the documents, no. In my conversation with Jan, yes, because we still need something to call it.
exactly, so that we all know what we're talking about. You're absolutely right, Valerie. We really probably need to stay away from that. And I love belonging, fairness, representation. Clearly, those are the values, inclusion, clearly. And so, yes, I can't remember all that, I know. And the words change like everything else that we touch. The nuances are there. But really reflecting, building a culture that meets the organization's needs and promotes the values that are critical to them. Every company has a mission statement. And when I work with clients that haven't bothered to take the time, that's part of their homework. I want you to go figure out what about this company really appeals to you. Why is this role as their next CEO important? What is it you're hoping to accomplish as their next president? And really doing a deeper dive into the media to see what is being said, what's not being said, equally important, and then fashion your story in a way that's going to make sense.
I love that. So let's talk just a little bit about trends in terms of, we've read some places that there's more competitive, that things have gotten more competitive. And we were chatting about how that kind of depends on the level of executive that you're talking about. And that term people use very broadly. So we might be seeing a more competitive space in the lower levels of executives or upper management, but you're not seeing that at the C-suite level.
No, I'm definitely not. I would say for every candidate that makes it through to second, third, fourth round of interviews, there will always typically be a minimum of 3 candidates presented fairly early on. And depending in education, it's going to be a bigger pool. It might be 10 or 12 that rapidly winnows down. But ultimately, there are 3, and then typically 2, and then 1. And it's not as if hundreds of people are making an initial cut at that level, at least across all the fields that I'm working in, the different industry types. Being able to differentiate is knowing your own stories of work we do so well, but not being concerned about anybody else's sandbox. You know your value, and by the time you get to that point in the process, you are already linking the stories, the actions to what the results are that organization is seeking. And using some of those tools strategically, even at the C level. I am amazed that many of my clients come back to say that the hiring panel that's advancing them said they were the only ones that bothered to follow up after an interview. Seriously? At that level, we know we see it among entry level, we see it among mid-tier professionals, but it's appalling to me that at the C-suite, there are people that just are taking the shortcut. They're branding themselves as mediocre candidates, and we don't work with mediocre candidates, do we?
No, we try very hard to get them past that. So
Yes.
last thing, we talked a little bit about this as well. Ageism, again, this is a place where there's a little bit of a split because we see that ageism making more of an impact at the middle, higher management, and you say not as much on the C-suite side.
I'd say definitely not on the C-suite side. It is that seniority, that experience, the breadth and depth of knowledge, the track record that can be clearly articulated. Oftentimes, by the time someone is a C-suite executive, they're also serving on boards, and so you're reflecting that capability, the fact that they can build, fundraising, the outreach in the community, depending on the organization, comes from the wealth and depth of that wisdom and knowledge. And so when folks occasionally will say to me, oh, do I need to pair off my first 15 years at, United Technologies, or do I have to cut out this healthcare? No, you want to have it truncated appropriately. We want to give you the experience. We're not going to throw a 1960s or 70s or maybe even 80s as a year on the resume, but we're going to talk about the years of experience, quantify that piece of it, and the promotions that clearly there are going to be throughout the career. And that brings great value. They don't need to worry about that. Depending on whether an executive is seeking another full-time opportunity, or oftentimes I'm seeing this with my retiring and aging baby boomers, they're coming back out of retirement multiple times to take fractional interim roles. They are sometimes taking full-time roles for longer fractional that might go 1-2 years. I just came down on a plane with a client from 35 years ago, recognized me in line. We chatted, we got off in Charlotte, we went to the club and talked for another hour. He's out of retirement, he's in his mid to late 60s. He's taken a 2-year interim role because he can bring great value and he's having fun with it. And frankly, they get bored. You can only golf so many times a week. You can only do things with your grandkids so often. And these are folks that are high powered, very successful. They're going to be bored unless they get active with different board opportunities, board versus board. Oh, I like that.
You're bored, so you aren't bored.
I'm going to do something with that. But yeah.
I love it. So during the symposium, when you joining us in Baltimore, and you're going to do 90 minutes or so on this topic, and you already shared a little bit, but what types of documents and opportunities will you be talking about?
I really want to give the full bandwidth of what a portfolio could look like. And in this last 6-month window, I have seen such increased demand. Finding my bandwidth to be able to deliver has been my challenge. But everybody that I'm working with, and these are in different industries, I will give some great examples of what those look like. Also, because most of us are practitioners, whether we're strategists, writers, coaches, or all of the above, I think it's critically important, as CTL does, to talk about how to market it, how to package it, how to present it, and what's the appropriate timing. Clearly, how to price it and how to close it. And so I want to do a full wraparound to show all of the deliverables, the value that can be delivered, and what it can mean to a practitioner. I'm pretty passionate about it. This is such an awesome audience, both the ones we're serving and who are members of Career Thought Leaders and coming to our symposium. And I want to really be generous and give as much as I can so you'll all have fun and profitability doing this as well.
I love that. I love that. Well, this is such a great conversation. Jan is just working her stuff there at the university, but I know you're also about to go on vacation. So Jan, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. The deadline for registration for the symposium is coming up on the 20th of December. The price will go up after the 20th of December. So if you aren't registered yet, get it done. If you are an associate or another member or have one of our certifications, watch your email tomorrow morning. We'll be sending that discount code out one last time. If you want to get it before then, shoot me an email and we'll send it to you. But we just can't wait to learn more from you, Jan, and all the other great presenters who are joining us in Baltimore.
Thanks, Marie. We are going to have a great time and the learning will be off the charts. I mean, really, I think what was the name of this? Rise above the crowd. We're all going to rise above the crowd of fellow practitioners because we're getting the best of the best across the board. Can't wait.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you. We won't be meeting for the next 2 weeks, probably. I might sneak on New Year's Eve and just wish you all a New Year's Eve, but otherwise we'll see you in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you all.